By 2019, Seattle's downtown held more than half the city's jobs and over 80% of its office space. An urban engine built by port grit, aerospace ambition, and tech dominance. Those routines that once powered this winter city have cracked. Today, the towers stand tall, but far fewer people walk among them. How did Seattle achieve such singular prosperity, and what invisible pressure made its comeback so uncertain? Cargo cranes once framed Seattle's horizon, moving timber, fish, and goods through one of the busiest ports on the West Coast. For decades, the city's fortunes rode on the tides, with dockworkers, shipbuilders, and longshore crews fueling a steady pulse of trade. Then came the aerospace era. Boeing's rise in the mid-20th century brought thousands of skilled jobs, with assembly lines stretching from Everett to Renton. The city's skyline grew taller as engineers and machinists filled new apartment towers, and the jet age stitched Seattle into global networks. But the most dramatic transformation arrived with the digital revolution. Microsoft's campus in nearby Redmond drew software talent from around the world, while Amazon's rapid expansion anchored a new tech corridor in South Lake Union. By the late 2010s, downtown was no longer just a business district, it was the city's economic engine. High-rise offices clustered around Westlake and Denny, restaurants and cafes packed at lunch, and light rail trains carried waves of workers every weekday morning. At its peak, downtown concentrated more than half of Seattle's jobs and over 80% of its office space. Nearly two-thirds of all city apartments, 90% of hotel rooms, and the majority of property tax revenue depended on the dense weekday routine. The city's prosperity and its sense of momentum became inseparable from the daily flow of commuters into the urban core. For a time, it looked unstoppable. Prosperity in Seattle came with a price that was easy to overlook. As tech salaries soared and new arrivals poured in, the cost of living climbed just as quickly. Rents in neighborhoods like Capitol Hill and South Lake Union rose year after year, pushing many longtime residents to the margins or out to distant suburbs. For workers without a six-figure income, the daily commute stretched farther, sometimes over an hour each way, just to find an apartment within reach. The city's housing market became a competitive arena where bidding wars and wait lists were the norm, not the exception. Downtown success was not just about expensive condos or luxury towers. The concentration of jobs and amenities drove up demand for everything nearby, from groceries to parking. Even small changes in office hiring or layoffs could ripple through the fabric of entire neighborhoods, affecting school enrollments, transit use, and the viability of small businesses. Researchers at the University of Washington's Runstad Center point to this as a structural risk. When a city's prosperity depends so heavily on a single concentrated economic engine, any disruption, no matter how small, can threaten the balance. The housing inflation and commute strain that once signaled growth now hinted at a deeper vulnerability. Seattle's downtown was not just a symbol of success. It was also a warning that when the engine falters, the whole system feels it. Weekday mornings in downtown Seattle once meant a steady river of people. Office workers streaming off buses, lining up for coffee, filling plazas and sky bridges. That rhythm has changed. By March 2025, pedestrian sensors and business tallies showed just 101,000 weekday workers in the core, compared to 168,000 in 2019. The difference is not subtle. On a Wednesday at noon, blocks that used to pulse with foot traffic now feel open, almost quiet. Sidewalks along 3rd Avenue and Westlake have room to spare. Cafes that once struggled to keep up with lunch crowds now push back chairs and close early. John Scholes, who leads the Downtown Seattle Association, tracks these numbers closely. He points to the DSA dashboard, where every uptick or dip in pedestrian counts tells a story about the city's health. The data is clear. Even with some workers returning, the weekday core is missing nearly 40% of its old crowd. That absence ripples outward. Fewer people on the ground means less demand for everything: sandwiches, shoe repairs, dry cleaning, corner newsstands. The small businesses that built their model on office lunch rushes now face a new math, with many forced to reduce staff or shutter altogether. These are not just abstract figures. They show up in the city's daily life. Light rail cars run with empty seats during what used to be peak hours. Newsstands and flower carts that once thrived on impulse buys from hurried commuters have vanished from their regular corners. The hum of a city at work has been replaced by something thinner, more tentative. The drop in workers is not just a blip. It is a new reality, and every empty seat or shuttered storefront is a reminder that the old routine has not come back. Downtown Seattle's office towers were built for crowds. Now, vacancy defines the skyline. By the end of 2025, the vacancy rate in the city's core reached 35.6%, one of the highest in the country. That's over 16.4 million square feet of empty space sitting idle, not counting another 2 million square feet being offered for sublease. For a city once optimized around full buildings and packed elevators, the scale of emptiness is hard to miss. A leasing director at a major brokerage describes the shift as relentless. In past years, tenants competed for the best views and fastest internet. Now, landlords compete for tenants. Even the most prestigious addresses, Columbia Center and F5 Tower, offer more than just a lease. Extended periods of free rent, generous tenant improvement budgets, and flexible terms have become the norm. The gap between what is advertised and what is actually paid is growing wider, as effective rents fall behind the official numbers. The numbers tell a stark story. Direct vacancy, truly empty offices, continues to climb, while sublease space has started to shrink. Some companies are holding on to space, hoping for a rebound, while others have given up and handed back the keys. New leases are being signed, but often at a fraction of previous rates, and mostly by tenants consolidating rather than expanding. Confidence has taken a hit. Brokers report that even small deals now move slowly, with every negotiation hinging on concessions. The pipeline for new construction has stalled. Developers see little reason to break ground with so much space unclaimed. The office market's health is no longer just a business story. It is a signal of how much the city's economic engine has changed. Every empty floor plate is a reminder that downtown's old routine is not coming back, at least not in the same way. On a Saturday morning in July, Pike Place Market swells with visitors. Cruise ships dock at Pier 66, unloading crowds who fill the waterfront and spill into downtown shops. By the end of 2025, Seattle expects a record 1.9 million cruise passengers, each one a fresh burst of energy for hotels, restaurants, and attractions. Hotel lobbies buzz with families checking in for summer vacations, and weekend occupancy rates now rival those from the city's best years. Visitors snap photos at the Gum Wall, line up for chowder, and pack out shows at the Paramount. For a few days, it feels like the city is back. But the picture changes on Monday. A hotel manager in Belltown watches as the lobby empties by mid-morning. Business bookings, once the bread and butter of downtown hotels, have shifted. Weekday occupancy never quite recovers to levels from before 2020, even as weekend rooms fill up months in advance. The mix of guests has changed too. Leisure travelers and tourists now outnumber business guests, and the steady stream of conference goers has slowed to a trickle. The manager points to a chart behind the front desk. Weekends are solid, but midweek dips are impossible to ignore. Downtown's sidewalks tell the same story. On Friday nights and Sunday afternoons, sports fans and concert-goers fill the blocks around the stadiums. Yet by noon on a Tuesday, entire corridors feel thin, with only a handful of office workers making their way between meetings. Retailers and lunch spots near the hotels see a rush on weekends, then brace for quiet stretches during the week. The city's recovery is visible, but uneven. Seattle's downtown has become two places at once. One is a lively destination for visitors. The other is a quieter, less certain hub for the workers who once defined its daily rhythm. Lunch hour used to mean a line out the door for places like Il Corvo, where handwritten menus sold out by early afternoon. Now, even the most beloved spots struggle to fill tables. Chef Mike Easton's decision to close Il Corvo in March 2020 reads less like a story about the pandemic and more like a warning about what happens when the weekday crowd disappears. His notebooks, once filled with orders from tech workers and courthouse staff, became a record of vanishing demand. Across downtown, the numbers back this up. Retail net absorption for 2025 sites at negative 934,000 square feet. That means more space left empty than leased, a reversal from the years when every storefront seemed to have a new tenant ready to move in. For a small business owner, the math is unforgiving. A restaurateur on 4th Avenue flips through last year's sales reports. Weekday lunch revenue has dropped by nearly half since 2019. Staff shifts have been cut, and some days, the kitchen closes early. It's not just restaurants, shoe repair shops, dry cleaners, and newsstands all depend on a steady flow of office workers. Without them, fixed costs like rent and utilities do not go away, but the margin for survival shrinks. The city's budget feels the strain too. Downtown generates about half of Seattle's business activity, and when sales drop, so do the receipts from business and occupation taxes. Internal city memos warn of millions in lost revenue, forcing tough choices about future services and investments. The ripple effect does not stop at the shop door. As the weekday core thins out, every empty storefront and every lost sale chips away at the fiscal foundation that supports parks, transit, and public safety. The story of one closed cafe is really the story of a city recalculating what it can afford, and what it risks losing if the old routine never fully returns. Transit planners in Seattle track recovery block by block, route by route. The numbers tell a story that is both hopeful and unfinished. Sound Transit's Link Light Rail, which once ran at full capacity during weekday peaks, now reaches about 87% of its ridership from before 2020 by late 2025. But that number hides a bigger gap. Weekday commutes only reach 82% of their old volume, while weekends, boosted by tourists and events, have nearly caught up. King County Metro buses show a similar pattern. Downtown routes, once packed with office workers, now recover at around 72% of 2019 levels on weekdays, even as weekend ridership climbs higher. This split is more than a statistic. For agencies that built their budgets around packed trains and buses, fewer weekday riders mean less fare revenue. In 2025, Sound Transit's fare box recovery hovers around 68% of what it once was, leaving a $60 million gap that taxes and subsidies have to fill. Metro's numbers tell the same story. Peak hour buses run with open seats, and the agency warns that service cuts may be needed if the new pattern holds. Transit, in this moment, acts as a stress test for the city's routines. The old baseline, full trains at rush hour and crowded bus stops on 3rd Avenue, may not return. Agencies now plan for a future where 75 to 80% of the old traffic is the new normal, and every decision about routes, funding, and service levels has to account for a thinner, less predictable downtown pulse. Visible hardship is now part of downtown's daily reality. As crowds have thinned, the presence of people living unsheltered has become more pronounced. Point in Time counts from King County show that the number of individuals experiencing homelessness in the downtown core has grown since 2020, with service providers reporting higher demand for outreach and shelter beds. The absence of the old weekday bustle means that tents, makeshift beds, and crisis response teams are no longer buffered by the constant movement of office workers. For many, the city feels more exposed. Service organizations such as DESC and Compass Housing Alliance have expanded street outreach, but the challenge is steep. Case managers describe a cycle. More visible need draws more calls for help, but resources are stretched thin. In response, Seattle allocated $135 million from the American Rescue Plan Act between 2021 and 2023. To support downtown recovery, these funds went to a mix of business relief, housing, and social services, helping some storefronts reopen and adding new shelter capacity, but not enough to close the gap entirely. The numbers behind the headlines are stark. Service intake metrics show that requests for housing assistance and mental health support have climbed each year. For those on the ground, the question is not whether hardship is visible, but how to meet it with enough urgency and support. As the city debates recovery, the reality for many is measured in nights spent outside and the wait for help. Seattle's downtown faces a crossroads with its future written in blueprints and paused construction schedules. The city's development pipeline still lists 5.3 million square feet of proposed projects, but those plans remain frozen as vacancy rates hover above 1/3 of all office space. In the third quarter of 2025, the market recorded a net absorption gain of just 21,117 square feet, the first positive movement in 4 years, yet barely a dent in the backlog. A city economic official describes the current mood as cautious but not resigned. With new groundbreakings on hold, attention turns to what can be done with the space already built. Options include converting offices into housing, incentivizing new types of tenants, and rewriting zoning codes to allow for more flexible uses. Each path brings trade-offs. Conversion costs are high, regulatory changes take time, and not every tower is suited for apartments or laboratories. Policy levers are on the table. Tax incentives for conversions, grants for small businesses, and targeted support for arts and childcare in vacant ground floor spaces are all possibilities. The city weighs whether to wait for demand to return or to actively reshape the core for a different mix of residents, workers, and visitors. The pipeline freeze is a signal. Inaction risks a long period of drift, while bold choices could give downtown a new purpose. The next steps will decide which story Seattle tells about its center. Every day, more than 1/3 of downtown Seattle's offices now sit empty, a visible measure of how quickly urban engines can stall. As cities everywhere face the same remote work reckoning, Seattle's next chapter will shape how we define resilience in the 21st century. The experiment is not over. The outcome will echo far beyond these streets. What would you do to reinvent a city's core? Share your thoughts below.